印度一大爷大娘去韩国旅游。
Imagine visiting one of the world's most sacred historical landmarks, only to witness something truly unbelievable. Recently, a shocking incident at Seoul's Gyeongbokgung Palace, where tourists were caught urinating against ancient royal walls, has sparked a global firestorm. But this isn't just about one isolated act of rudeness. From the streets of Japan to the museums of Europe, a growing wave of uncivilized behavior is fueling anti-China sentiment and raising a massive question. Why is this happening so frequently? Today, we're diving deep into the root causes, from the failures of a rigid education system to the lasting scars of a survival-first era. Is it a lack of manners, or the result of decades of state indoctrination? Let's pull back the curtain on the truth behind the headlines. You're watching China Uncovered. Recently, a shocking event took place at Seoul's famous Gyeongbokgung Palace in South Korea. Two tourists, believed to be from China, were caught on camera urinating together right against the historic stone walls of the Joseon dynasty's primary palace. Once the footage went viral, it sparked massive public outrage. According to JBC's Incident Team Leader program, the event happened around noon on November 10th near the stone wall by Gyeongbokgung's Sinmuman Gate. Witnesses captured video of a middle-aged man squatting in the bushes to relieve himself while holding some toilet paper. A police officer on patrol noticed this strange behavior and stepped in immediately. A woman in white pants was also seen squatting right next to the man in the exact same way. After a moment, she stood up and walked off, leaving a visible stain on her white trousers. The man then stumbled out from the greenery, with the entire incident caught on tape. The person who reported it recalled that dozens of Chinese tourists were visiting Gyeongbokgung Palace at that time, and this pair likely belonged to that group. It was later confirmed the man in the video was a Chinese tourist in his 70s. At 3:30 p.m. on November 10th, he was fined 50,000 Korean won, or about $34.40. The woman in the clip faced no penalties, though the exact reasons haven't been shared. Built in 1395 during the Joseon dynasty, Gyeongbokgung is the largest of the 5 royal palaces and a major historic landmark. It's also one of Seoul's top spots for travelers. This rude behavior created a sharp contrast to the palace's noble atmosphere, leaving many people stunned. The person who posted the footage said a friend filmed it. The video was recorded in the afternoon and sent over to him. He voiced strong frustration online, saying, "I can't believe this happened right in front of my friend. I absolutely cannot accept it." The post drew many comments from South Korean netizens, including, "This is beyond belief," especially since our country has so many public restrooms. Back in 2018, Seoul's government already prioritized managing these facilities. City records show there are 20,554 public toilets, 8,000 staff members, and weekly inspections of busy spots. Basically, finding a bathroom in a major city like Seoul is never an issue. This public urination case is hard to blame on a lack of facilities. However, records show this wasn't the first time Chinese tourists were accused of such acts. On October 6th and 7th, a netizen reported seeing a woman and child. The pair was seen urinating at Yeongmyeori Coast in Jeju City. The witness noted that used wet wipes were left behind and eventually floated into the ocean. Yeongmyeori Coast is a national natural monument, named because the shoreline looks like a dragon's head. Netizens assumed the person involved was probably a Chinese tourist. These events happened close together at crowded tourist sites, making it easy for people to generalize. Individual misbehavior often turns into a group label when it happens so frequently. After that 2019 incident, tourism between China and South Korea slowed for a bit, but recovered after the pandemic. Korea Tourism Organization data shows Chinese visitors to South Korea hit 8.2 million in 2023. Yet, this spike in travelers came with more rude behavior. Some were seen yelling on Seoul's streets, while others vandalized sites from famous Korean dramas. Since September, South Korea has temporarily allowed visa-free entry for Chinese tourists, causing a massive influx of people. Lately, young Chinese travelers have started a Seoul syndrome trend on Douyin and Xiaohongshu, sharing their trips to South Korea. Reports from outlets like ChinaEconomy and National Daily mention that KTO's data lab released figures on November 15th, showing a steady rise in Chinese tourism since the pandemic's end. It's truly a significant recovery. Experts estimate that in 2024, nearly 4.66 million Chinese tourists visited South Korea, doubling the 2 million from 2023. Major Chinese social apps have fueled a Seoul travel trend, with many young people posting positive reviews about helpful locals giving directions or sharing pretty photos of the Han River and Namsan Tower. However, despite the attraction, the visa-free policy has actually increased anti-China feelings in Korean society. Many residents feel quite frustrated with the current situation. Lately, the count of anti-China banners on the streets has risen sharply. On September 29th, a conservative group in Seoul protested against the trial visa exemption for Chinese visitors. By 5 p.m., roughly 270 people joined in, holding signs that said things like oppose visa-free entry for 30 million Chinese tourists and keep our citizens safe before inviting more visitors. This growing anger on South Korean streets isn't happening without a clear reason. Political fights play a role, but the main trigger is the recurring rude behavior caught on video. Ironically, these actions are highlighted more abroad because they are already common in China. They don't just appear when people travel. Besides South Korea, the way some Chinese people behave in their own country is even more shocking. On November 17th, a man was seen defecating in the grass at Tiananmen Square. Online users commented on the video, with one saying, "Pooping at Tiananmen? That's definitely a piece of Chinese intangible cultural heritage." Another joked, "Now I really believe China is a democracy since they can go anywhere." On November 11th, at Nanjing's Metro Line 3, a man in a business jacket holding a cup walked up to a pillar, dropped his pants, and relieved himself. It took 30 seconds, and he left without cleaning. Security footage showed the man looked calm and just walked away casually after he finished. On January 15th in Suzhou, a man on Shehu West Road took off his pants and defecated right in the middle of traffic. In response, some netizens said, "Stop blaming everything on bias." These gross moments don't just happen abroad, they happen over and over in our own country. Reputations are built over a long period. Instead of claiming we are being singled out, we should admit that a lesson in public manners is needed. Now, let's look at the bigger picture. Why are Chinese travelers so frequently tagged as disrespectful? Reports indicate this isn't about racial bias, but rather the result of many repeated cases. Take a very recent example from February 2025. Kyoto, Japan, reported that the flood of Chinese tourists caused traffic jams, worse hygiene, and even people yelling anti-Japan slogans near temples. Kyoto's historic sites, like the Golden Pavilion and Kiyomizu-dera, are supposed to be calm Zen spaces. Instead, they were ruined by tourists blocking paths with selfie sticks and leaving trash. Another case happened in 2023 at the British Museum, where specific signs were posted. The signs in Chinese said no touching, because tourists kept breaking the rules by handling the exhibits. Some even took off their shoes and rested their feet near London's Tower Bridge. These stories might seem like jokes, but the laughter is followed by deep embarrassment. In Thailand, a huge hotspot for Chinese travelers, visitor numbers climbed past 10 million in 2024. But the negative news continued. At Pattaya Beach, some tourists were caught defecating in public. At Bangkok's Grand Palace, others ignored the no-shoes rule and just walked right in. At the Egyptian pyramids, people even tried to climb the structures for photos, causing local guides to protest. In this global environment, every move made by Chinese tourists abroad is under a microscope, acting as a direct reflection of their country's national image and reputation. Over the last 2 years, Pew Research Center surveys have signaled a warning for China's global status. The 2025 report showed that across 25 nations, only 36% of people liked China, while 54% had a negative view. This low popularity is most obvious in wealthy countries. In established democracies like the US, Japan, South Korea, and Australia, positive ratings often fell to 30% or even much lower. Negative views regarding China's social systems, behavior norms, and etiquette have stayed the same among more and more people. What's even scarier is that while these opinions are slightly better among younger people, they are still quite low. Even with the more open-minded and globally connected youth, there hasn't been a big shift in the overall view of China. But the real question is, why does this keep happening? Why is this rude behavior so often amplified when it happens in foreign countries? Where is the root cause? If we look closer, the problem goes way beyond just individuals. A failure in education is the main factor. China's school system, though very strict and focused on control, has long trained kids to be academic machines instead of modern citizens who know how to act decently in public settings and shared spaces. Today, civility education in schools is mostly just talk and slogans. It's found in flag-raising speeches, war propaganda, or essays that students have to memorize for class. But these lessons never actually reach their daily lives. Nobody teaches kids how to stay quiet in a library, wait in line for a bus, keep bathrooms clean, or respect history in a museum. Ethics classes are supposed to build social responsibility, but they mostly teach obedience. That is why many people say moral education is really just patriotic brainwashing or CCP indoctrination. If we look at travelers over age 70, their behavior isn't just a habit, it's a mark left by the era they lived through. People born in the 40s and 50s grew up under Mao Zedong. From the Great Famine to the Cultural Revolution, the only goal in society was surviving day to day. During that period, the government focused on political movements and struggle, ignoring public manners. In rural areas, toilets were often just open pits, and cleanliness didn't exist. Many places had no trash systems, so littering was just a way of life, not seen as rude. Cities had old sewers and basic sanitation. Most importantly, people then had no idea what public space really meant or how to respect it. In that environment, it was impossible to learn the manners required by modern society. Civility needs stability, safety, and proper education, none of which were around back then. Deep down, the CCP never gave that generation a real civic education. Since childhood, they were taught ideology, loyalty to the group, and following the leader, but never learned public rules or etiquette. As adults, they naturally lack social awareness and cross-cultural sensitivity. When people from the 40s and 50s finally travel abroad, they bring a survival logic they've used for decades. It's the idea that being fast means being smart, public space belongs to no one, and rules are flexible. This was ignored at home, but in places with mature systems and sensitive cultures, the flaws stand out immediately. Thus, rude behavior is never just a personal mistake. It's the result of decades of social and political environment. On the other hand, long-standing domestic issues in China have also fueled these current problems. One clear example is the public facility system, specifically toilets. After the toilet revolution, city bathrooms improved, but in rural or remote areas, they are still scarce and filthy. Many people grew up with such poor conditions that they got used to finding a hidden corner when they were in a rush, which became a lasting habit. Cultural factors matter too. Traditional Chinese culture values restraint, but because the party destroyed those traditions, that restraint hasn't carried over to public awareness. Instead, it has turned into a herd mentality. At Chinese tourist spots, if someone cuts in line or litters, others don't stop them. They just join in. Once this behavior becomes a group activity, it snowballs. When traveling, people naturally bring these default habits with them. If others shout, they shout too. If others misbehave, they think it's no big deal. In short, the rude behavior of Chinese people abroad isn't a sudden change, but an amplification of old habits in a new place. Scholar Zhu Dake believes this lack of manners is tied to long-term class struggle education, where everyone is seen as an enemy. For enemies, there's no need to be polite or follow any social rules. This revolutionary logic hasn't faded in the 21st century. It just turned into a brutal competition for limited resources. The issue isn't a lack of education, but too much of the wrong kind, specifically struggle-based education. Other experts note the most ironic part is the CCP's dual face on this topic. Lately, the government has pushed a civilized China image with big plans like the 2023 to 2025 tourism upgrade, which sounds quite impressive on paper. They talk about creating civilized benchmarks and role models while constantly putting out travel tips and proposals. But when the camera shifts from the ads to real life, the gap is clear. These initiatives usually stay on TV while actual execution is a mess. The deeper irony is that the CCP tries to use propaganda to replace real progress, treating a national image project as if it were actual civilizational growth. They think being civilized is something you can achieve with posters, slogans, and catchy phrases. But true civility has never been just a decoration. It's the result of internal character and external systems working together. A society won't become civilized with just a few slogans. Nor can it fix public education gaps with nationalism. The bad behavior of Chinese tourists is the most direct proof against this fake system. No matter how grand the propaganda or loud the slogans, behavior will always expose the truth if reality doesn't change. The Gyeongbokgung Palace incident is just the tip of the iceberg. However, it serves as a reminder to the world that civilization is not innate. It must be cultivated. The online backlash is not a bad thing. It is a warning about the results of the CCP's decades of hollow education.